Good morning, everybody. My guest today is Joe Long, founder of HackerBoxes, the original monthly subscription box for DIY electronics and hardware hacking. I've known about HackerBoxes for many years, so it was a real pleasure to meet Joe at B-Sides Tampa last month. He's an engineer, a patent attorney, a hardware hacker who's taught over 1 million people how to build and break things. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, I am very happy that you're here. I think you'll be really interested to learn more about what you do and the hardware hacking. So let's just jump right in. When did you first start your interest in computers?
That's kind of a tough question for those of us that have been interested in computers and technology our whole lives. I would say for me, 1981 was kind of a pivotal year. I was only, I'm pretty old, so I was around then, but I was only a 9-year-old boy at that time.
Okay.
1981, but that was the year that Frogger and Donkey Kong came out. And,
wow.
And I love both of those games, and you had to put quarters in them. And I was just fascinated by the fact that I could play a game against a computer, and that it got harder and harder the better I got, and that it was just overwhelming to have this experience of a new space and a new world, which probably seems very silly by today's standards, but it was truly impactful, and I became immediately obsessed with computer technology. And I think it was probably so I was 9 years old then. It was probably within the next year or two that I got my first computer, that was a Commodore 64, and we had TRS-80s and Apple IIs at school, and I just played with them all the time. I spent any extra time I had programming and playing around with computers, and eventually playing around with hardware. And, to the extent where it got to the point where I would learn things in school and then realize I already knew them because I had to learn them to do something on the computer. That the computer was superseding my my formal education, and I went to a very good school. It's just that there was no keeping up with everything that was coming through the computer, and there was no internet then. I can't even imagine what it's like now. But yeah, so that's my kind of silly answer to that. But completely honest, video games.
Yeah, that's cool. So that means you spent probably a lot of time in the arcades in the 90s, like I did.
Yep. Arcades and also the skating rink in my town had an all skate, so I could be there all night, all Friday night till Saturday morning, just playing Frogger and Donkey Kong back to back.
Very cool. One thing I'm curious about, a lot of people I talk to have somewhat of a similar background. And a lot of people start with these like Commodore and older computers like I did. And you were saying programming. I was wondering, do you remember what language it was? Probably the same as everybody.
Yeah. So the very first language I learned, just like everyone, was, 10 print hello, 20 go to 10, the basic programming language. But it wasn't that long after I got pretty good at basic that I started exploring assembly language. And that was on the Apple II. So 6502 assembly, which was difficult to learn for, I think I was probably 12, 13 at the time. Difficult for me to learn. It's a very abstract way of thinking, but by today's microprocessor standards, the 6502 is very simple. So that was nice that you could go right close to the iron, which, I think a lot of people are dissuaded from doing now, although I try to encourage my students to do it. But so I went from basic and then quickly to assembly. And then, in school, I used Pascal in high school, and then C and Lisp and other, more kind of mature languages when I was in college. So.
Nice. Very cool. That's, those are great language. C, learning about memory management, right?
Yeah.
I know for me, C++ was quite a beast. I spent a lot of, I reread the same book over and over until I got it, but.
Yeah, but was it Jarn and Stroustrup? I read that book a few times.
The exact same book. Yeah. I've read it so many times. Back in the 90s, I think, that book was out, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. So let's shift into how you get your first interest in cybersecurity.
So I would say very early on, like when I wasn't, because a lot of things that I think anyone encounters, especially when they're really young, is just kind of accidental. Like, what do you stumble upon? And back in those early computer days in the early 80s, early mid 80s, we didn't have the internet yet, but we had bulletin board systems. And a lot of the bulletin boards that you would initially go to because they had wares on them, like you go there to get a video game or a new game that came out, also had a lot of information about secure things that we would now call security research. Back then we called it hacking and freaking, articles from 2600 and from Frack and from other online sources. And I found those so interesting because they were kind of deviant, defiant. I don't know what you want to call it. It was like, you're not supposed to know this. It's like, well, if I'm not supposed to know it, I better know it. So I started reading these things that we used to call G files, freak files, whatever. And I found it really interesting that for any system, there was someone out there trying to exploit the system. And I wasn't necessarily trying to exploit anything, but I did find it really interesting. I mean, how to know the most about something, how better to know the most about something than trying to find out what its flaws are, which, as a little aside, I applied that later in my academic life. I know, when I was in law school, which I was originally doing just out of curiosity, I had no intention at that time of being a lawyer. I took this approach to studying law that I was going to figure out. I studied everything and I thought, law is so over consuming. I can't just study every little detail. So I would study something thinking, how would I break this or get around it, or what's wrong with it? Or what did the justice who wrote the majority opinion of some case, what did they get wrong? Or what did I disagree with? Because when you take that kind of defiant, looking behind the curtain, looking into the cracks type of approach, which I think now we kind of broadly call the hacker ethos, when you're doing that, you really get like a deep expertise, and it's only the certain type of edge case human that is obsessed or gets really over interested with that sort of thing. And I think that was my early introduction, was that I saw this information about exploits and weaknesses, and getting to the detail of something, so that you're not just learning about it, but you're learning about what's wrong with it. And then, or to phrase it as a question, so what else? So you've mastered this thing. Now what else? How do I break it, misapply it, reapply it, and then ultimately secure it? Because if I can break it, someone else can break it. And you just realize that there's, the rabbit hole goes deeper than just mastering something. True mastery is, is being able to undo a thing or
Right.
or equally protect it. Right. So
Yeah, you're good when you can make something do something, and you're really, really good when you can make it do things it was not designed to do, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And in a way, that's sort of what engineering is, like everyday engineering is, use a bolt, but real engineering comes down to, what in using a bolt, how can I just barely use it? I want it so that it holds the bridge together plus a 20% safety factor and no more, right? I'm not going to over apply resources, because that's not great engineering, right? To have, one, over specified bolt that's never going to break, but you're spending 3 times as much money or time or other resources on it. And I think a lot of engineering comes down to that, like how to push things right to their limit, almost to the point of using them in a different way. But, at the very least, like, getting the most out of them. So you have to understand the limitations of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it super interesting that you mentioned the parallels with legal and cybersecurity. I guess in law, it's the same thing, right? The person that has the most time and you can always dig deeper and go beyond the last people before you, and then find things that might help you in your case and whatnot. Is that the idea?
Unfortunately, I do think there is a little bit to that. And I know, particularly in my area, patent law, if, when you're arguing with the patent office about something, if you can just put that little bit of extra effort in there to make a little bit better argument, then the patent examiner might consider your argument and say, oh, yeah, maybe I kind of see that, whereas if you just do very cursory surface level argument, even if you think it's a good argument, and one could ostensibly say it is, it might not be good enough, and a lot of things just come down to, the upping of resources. And again, like I was saying, you kind of want to look at how to most efficiently apply things. Well, that comes down to resources like time and money too.
Right.
Like, let's say protecting some technology is worth a certain amount of value, some resource, usually money, which can be equated to time as well. How much are you going to put into it, right? Like if you have a new shape for USB plug housing, that's going to be worth so much. You're going to argue that so far. But if it's a new drug that might make, billions of dollars, then you're going to, you throw everything at protecting that.
Right.
So
yeah. Makes a lot of sense. It's like risk management, right? And identifying what makes the most sense and prioritizing. Cool. Let's move on to the next question. What is one of the coolest hack you've pulled off?
Okay, well, that's a tough question, because I don't really know. I mean, I'd say there are some things I've designed that are really cool, but So, something that I think, and I'm going to put a category on this because I don't want to talk about any exact specifics, but because I've done a lot of hardware, which, generally these days, or last 30 years, 40 years, boils down to embedded system, because interesting hardware, no offense to like radio engineers, since I kind of am one also, but involves microprocessors or microcontrollers. Those things get really complicated, and they often are used in really interesting applications. Like I've done a lot of communication systems work, a little bit of medical, and those are really interesting applications. But when you're dealing with a piece of hardware that has inherently limited resources, so, if you have a small embedded system, you can't just, alloc all day long, right? You have to use the resources you have. And if it's a communication systems, there's often buffers, and you're buffer limited, and buffer management. And then, of course, then that opens itself up to exploits, because buffer overflows, and, you can get into denial of service of things, or you can kind of buffer full, and, or maybe even trying to do the buffer in a certain pattern or something. And I think early on in my career, I had several instances where there was a system that would very, very rarely, like 10 to the power negative something cycles break down, or something work. And in a communication systems, a lot of time that comes down to a buffer issue. And so I became really interested in and quickly very good at instrumenting, both virtually, like using software, but then also with, wires, jumper wires, solder, and physical measurement instruments, communication systems, so that I could sort of observe the operation of a buffer in a communication system. And there were several things that were kind of big, ongoing, complicated hairball problems that other people had thrown their arms up in the air with, that I was able to figure out by just really kind of looking at where, basically, like, I don't know, I kind of want to use the phrase follow the money, but that's not it. But follow the data, like follow the memory, like where's the information being stored, and how is that information breaking the system in some way? And what is that really weird edge case where, the buffer wraps right at the boundary, right when it overflows, right when an interrupt occurs. And in that one instance, it drops a byte, and then that causes some data to be loaded incorrectly, and then the system crashes, or worse yet, some security system doesn't interlock the way it's supposed to, and it opens a weakness. And so I think because I became a real sleuthy detective about finding these little things. I did that on many systems where afterwards I felt like, oh, well, because really, if you think about it, the question you're asking is, what are things you've done that make you proud? And there are things like, oh, a bunch of people gave up on this, and then I got real Sherlock Holmes on a couple of wires, or a couple of little bits, or just one little timing situation, and found the flaw. So it's
Nice. I'm curious, what is it that you were measuring, observing on the hardware?
Well, the reason why I can say this broadly is, one thing that I love about doing hardware and embedded systems is you end up working on a lot of different stuff, because your expertise is the technology, not what you're doing with it, right? Just like someone who's a general IT expert might have done IT at a bank, and then IT in a hospital, and then IT at a school, and then IT for a startup, and then IT for the government, and you do all these different contexts. Well, it's kind of like that with hardware too. So I've worked on a lot of comm hardware. I've done some space stuff. I've done medical devices, and a lot of the kind of underlying things, like I was saying, many of this sort of things boil down to a buffer, and mismanagement of buffers, and just memory management in general. And that, so because it was such a wide variety of things, how I was monitoring it would depend on what the protocol was, because if you're just talking about like a serial interface, like something like a really high speed, like something akin to like RS-232 or 44, then what, we're looking at things with just, another system that has those ports, or maybe back in the day, we had some like Hewlett-Packard protocol analyzers. And sometimes you have to design some hardware that does, that can, a lot of times when you're debugging hardware, you need to make other hardware to kind of interface with it, and that's always a lot of fun too. And you get really, really fast at designing things. So like nowadays, one of the things I'm really good at, and it's how HackerBoxes is able to work, is I can spin designs very, very quickly. They're not something you could go buy at Best Buy, but they work. Right. Then there's something you can learn from and play with. And I've gotten to the place where I can do that really quickly. So it makes sense for me to be called upon to design something that could query another system, because I don't have to go through I'm not reliant on the process of doing like a whole systems design where I have a year of design meetings and a team of people that review this and that. I just whip it up like that and hook it up and see if it works. And if it doesn't, I just change it. And that kind of rapid almost hacking a system to reverse engineer it or to examine it in some ways also sort of, it's very akin to rapid prototyping. So
That's awesome.
that's,
Building hacker tools really quick.
yeah.
How do you actually, and you don't have to share that if you don't want to, but I'm wondering how you get the piece, like you design it and then you get the PCBs probably assembled somewhere else, right? Printed out and assembled. Just curious a little bit how that works at a high level.
So, well, nowadays it's, getting a PCB, spinning up a PCB is really easy. And the tools for doing it, the free tools you can access like KiCad and things like that they're so powerful. I mean, I would say that the tools that I have on my desktop that I use for doing hardware design, which are I haven't paid for any of them. They're all not that I stole them. They're just free. They are as good as tools that 25 years ago, I worked for companies where we had a $250,000 license and we had to all argue over who was getting to use the dongle that day to access software. So, nowadays,
that parallel printer.
yeah,
Dongle.
exactly.
I'm wondering, I'm trying to remember the name. I've done a little bit of that, nowhere near like you, but I've done, a few PCBs, and there was, back in the 90s, there was this one piece of software everybody used. I'm wondering if that's the one you're referring to.
In the 90s, I think back then, a lot of people were using Cadence tools.
Okay.
And I think Altium had some pretty good software then that wasn't as expensive. And that's what I know. I did a lot of work using Altium when I was at Georgia Tech, and I could whip out quick, nice little boards. And then, nowadays we mostly use the board houses. So speaking differently than the software now, of a lot of people use JLC PCB. That's one of my favorites, in PCBWay, who I also really like. And those companies even have their own software that you can use, but if you wish to. And I know for a while there, when it was first becoming easy to order like a quick little batch of like 10 prototype pieces of hardware, which, because I often had to make hardware to kind of use it to dig into other hardware, I had to make it as a tool. I had to spin these things really quickly. And there was like I remember there was a company called Alberta Circuits, and there was another one that was like, I can't remember, something that implied that it was fast, like Rapid Circuits or something. And they would make you a little set of like 5 or 10 boards really quickly. And some of them required that you you use their software. Like you couldn't just like upload a Gerber file to them, or if you did, it was a lot more error prone or difficult. So it's really cool that nowadays that's become so smooth. It's a lot of hobbyist type of people, and even in the commercial space, not even just hobbyists, use KiCad.
Nice. Yeah. And I think AI now is probably going to help more people learn and be able to play with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it might. I know there's a company out there called Flux AI that uses AI to do some board designs. And it's been on my to-do list to play with that, but I haven't really taken the time yet. I probably need to, but the interesting thing with hardware design is, and not to say that AI can't help with this. I'm sure it can. I mean, like I said, I haven't dug into it, so I don't want to pretend to have expertise in it. But the hardware design, there's not a lot of room for error. I mean, there's practically none. Like it has got to be incredibly correct, right? You can't. And I often joke with people, especially students that I work with, that you get an A for getting 92% right, but in engineering, being 99.999% right is abject failure, right? Do you want to go on the airplane that crashes 0.001% of the time? No, you don't. Nor do you want to drive over the bridge. And you certainly can't rely upon even a cheap $29 crappy throwaway cell phone that drops 0.001% of the packets, and you just get other garbage on your screen. It's just engineering has to be perfect, and that and anywhere that it's not perfect, like a communication channel, you have to have mechanisms to mitigate imperfections, and that you can't just lay out a circuit board and just get 98% of the traces right. And so you can't just have 6 fingers or whatever other things you end up with AI stuff. So I highly suspect these tools that I claim that not really have used much yet, like the Flux AI stuff, and I know there's some other companies that are doing that. I'm sure a big part of what their development is let the artificial intelligence algorithm kind of solve the problem for you, and then most of their work is probably then verify and validate. And I was actually having a conversation with someone this morning about how I think going forward, and this is a bigger, more esoteric issue, or I guess more almost like a philosophical or societal issue, that every time we have a new technology, there's a bunch of people that are upset about it and displaced. All of those poor people that got laid off from the buggy whip manufacturing or the gas powered street light companies, they all found something else to do, right? And right now, I think a lot of people are being sold the AI is coming for you thing, and a lot of that is just because it's very convenient for big companies to just they've been, every quarter they do their earnings report and they sit around and talk about what excuse are we going to use? How can we get away with laying people off? And then they were like, AI, that's it. Lay everyone off. It's all because of AI. And I actually think that there's one of the areas where humans are going to be almost more needed in the future is going to be validating and verifying and securing AI because, I mean, and I hate talking about AI like it's a thing. It's just a bunch of statistical models. There's not, it's not, it's kind of funny for me because I had first, high paying, really professional AI job in 91, because it kind of reminds me about how the world discovered the internet in 95 and everyone was like, have you heard of the internet? And like, yeah, I heard about it in the 70s, congratulations for you. And now it's like kind of like that with AI, like it's this big thing. And it is, these language models are very interesting and there will be something more interesting next year. And it will become as silly that we talked about AI as it was when every company had to have .com on the name. I mean, I remember during the .com bubble being like, I don't call plumber telephone just because they have because they're using some certain communications model. Now they put a marker of that model on the name of the company. It was profoundly, irritatingly absurd that, that you would be a company doing whatever and you had to call yourself .com because you had a connection to this thing that, anyone with
.com or nothing back then.
Yeah, it was, and now I think it's like that with it's like AI. It's like everything. Like I actually made a thing recently that was like HackerBoxes, and it had the little star in the corner. It said AI enhance, and I hope that my customers, 90-something% of them, were able to be like, "Oh, that's hilarious! You're making fun of all of those, muggles who think that this is something now." It's like, okay, it's a thing in the sense that it's not a nothing, but it's not what you think it is. So anyway.
Yeah, that's usually exactly what happened with every technology, right? There's overhype, there's value, but it's overhyped, so it kind of shadows the real value.
Yeah. And I think the real human value here, the thing that we're going to get to do next is we have this new powerful tool, this new powerful employee, and we're going to have to manage it. Right? We're going to have to, especially if it's so much faster than us. I know one of your questions is how is AI going to impact cybersecurity? Well, the big problem is it's going to seek to exploit so much more rapidly than a human could. And and I know. There are a lot of new tools. There's one that was recently announced that's coming out of China, and now the hackers of Russia are using it. And so, there's this AI tool for doing hacking.
Yep.
And then, so we'll need an AI tool to watch that. And then also humans need to keep their eyes on it. And, I find it really interesting. It's exciting. It's as with any time when technology is changing, which now is always, it's exciting to be alive and to observe it. For sure.
Yeah, I think it's not, like you said, I don't think it's going to replace anybody. I think the experts still need to be there. At least in my experience with like security testing and software engineering, you can have it build things, but it's not going to take you all the way to enterprise level, scalable, secure kind of solution. And same with pen testing. It will help you find a lot of things that'll make you go faster and deeper than ever before. Yes, you can get value out of it by itself, but the real value is putting an expert along with the tool to go faster and deeper before. I'm thinking it's probably the same thing with hardware. It's not going to be fully automated, just like anything else. You still need the expert. You'll just be able to do a lot more faster.
Yeah.
I was just reading something about Jensen from NVIDIA. He was explaining about 10 years ago is when radiology started implementing a lot of computer vision and what they did, and everybody was saying radiologists would disappear. The truth is what happened is now there's more demand for radiology now that it's better. So probably a lot of the same thing we're going to see. Everything will move a lot faster, better, deeper, harder, and it'll keep us busy.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, I was thinking about how, because obviously, I guess maybe it's not obvious, but, HackerBox is an educational company. I've worked in the educational industry a fair bit in my life. I don't know if you want to call that an industry, the institution of higher education. The issue of sort of like, are we training too many computer scientists, or these people that are getting computer science degrees now, there's no jobs for them, everything like that. And I don't want to claim to be an economics expert, but I think there's a lot more economics game playing going on there than there is technological or education based things. But I almost feel like, and I have to admit, I have a bias here. I'm a technology person, that I think this is probably one of the best times to be studying technology. We're opening up more and more technologies that allow everything in our lives to be more and more technologically driven. Why would that be a time to get out of that field? I think, and especially then, you have every talking head on the news wants to say, these computer science majors, these graduates, they can't find a job. We don't need them anymore. It's like, that sounds like a perfect time to Warren Buffett right into, when other people are cautious, you be aggressive. And when other people are greedy, you be cautious, Like right now, if everyone's like, I'm not studying computer science.
That's funny. I got that Warren Buffett quote right here on the wall. Not too far.
Yeah, I love that. I love that quote. I think being, if you think about it in a way, it's very related to that hacker ethos we talked about before, being defiant, almost being,
yeah,
being the counter example, like whatever everyone's doing, like maybe look in the other direction and say, well, if everyone's doing A, are they missing B, or is there something in C that I can exploit or enjoy or prepare for while everyone's looking in the other direction? Or
yep, I agree. Like I was saying, I think it's going to actually create more work. So the people that are not afraid and still pursue their passion, there's going to be a lot for them in store.
Yeah, good point. Especially the passion point of that. I mean, you're gonna have a good time working on it, and you're passionate about it, right?
Totally, absolutely. So that'd be terrible for somebody that's passionate and not pursue their dream just because of what they hear in the news. All right, next one is what's something you think everyone can do to get better results when they test for security?
I would say, and let's put this purely in the context of hardware, securing hardware or hardware related security, just because that's probably more uniquely where I might have a more nuanced opinion. I could probably come up with a few things, but one thing I would say in particular is, when you're designing systems like an embedded system or something that's more hardware based, you do a lot of some people call this aspect code design, but you do a lot of systems partitioning. Like what are requirements or elements of a system that are going to be implemented in hardware? What are going to be implemented in software? What are things I'm going to need to write anew because I need to work in some unique way or with some certain efficiency? Or what are ones where I can just get a library that already runs on this hardware that I can leverage? And I think those partitions, especially when they become myriad. So a lot of embedded systems have, the hardware, the firmware, the libraries that go with the firmware, the communication protocol between the firmware and maybe other instances of the firmware, or maybe a PC, and then helper applications that run on a PC or on a mobile
apps and
right, or on the back end. And you start ending up with all of these subsystems. And I think the partitions between those, especially when on the fly you ever have to move those partitions, that a lot of design error can be introduced there, or subtle flaws. And I think that really keeping a strong eye on that and being really careful about thinking, oh yeah, that thing that we were doing by implementing this thing in hardware, that chip isn't available, let's just move it into software. Yeah, it might make sense to do that, but understand it's not just to make it work. It's to make it work and make it robust and secure, and all these other testing you have to do around it. And I think, in the early days of doing hardware and embedded systems, I say early days, in my early days, which actually kind of were the early days of that field, just making it work was enough, right? And you bought some, let's just say some, networking device. If it moved the packets through and you could get on another network or connect two sites together, that was great, right? But nowadays, worry a lot more about, can someone get in there and reconfigure it? Can it become part of an attack? Is it aware when someone is, man in the middling it or something like that? Like, is it, we're a lot more concerned with that nuance of, particularly around cybersecurity. And I think for designers to just always have their eyes open about something that might seem like a little change, and then you make the change and it works and you're like, hey, I did it. That the very beginning of the design, when you had to prove this is how I'm going to do it, and this is why it's secure. Any little change you make, you also need to give deep consideration to how is that change really, really secure, and how might that change ripple into other aspects of the system, and like, you and I were listing all these different subsystems in a complicated, interconnected solution. And it's like it's almost hard for it to fit all in one person's head, and practically impossible that how one of those might impact another one. And then even if you can get the people together and have a meeting and give consideration of that, and then in the development process, you change one little thing and everything falls apart, not acceptable. Right. So I think that's an area we need to keep there's a lot of lot of risk there. And I think that's something we need to, it's also just, it almost feels nebulous, right? It's something that like, it's like trying to hold water in your hands, like to keep people thinking about that and develop in the context of whatever it is they're working on, developing systems that keep control on that. We just have to keep encouraging that.
So when you're dealing with hardware, like when you're dealing with software, you can do regression testing, unit tests, and things like that to identify these things when you make a little change here and something breaks down there. Do you have either, process methodologies or tools to help you identify these things, or it's just really about sitting there and thinking through?
It is thinking through. I think also having systems. So, I mean, a very simple example of that is, if you relate to what you just said, which is really important, to kind of the example I was saying, where you take something that was done in the hardware and you move it to the software at some point midstream in the development. You need to have when the partition of around the requirements, right? So because a bigger system has a lot of requirements and then it's partitioned into subsystems. And when a partition changes, it's not acceptable for the hardware guy to be like, oh, well, we were making sure that the space that we had available for doing an OTA, an over the air update for a firmware image, that we had everything available there for it to be a second set to be received, for it to be validated, cryptographically verified before it was then made the active partition. Oh, well, we're not going to offer that feature anymore. That'll be handled in some other thing on the host system in a companion application. Therefore, we will take away our requirement for our testing and all the thing you were saying about regression testing and all that. We don't have that anymore. We're not responsible. Wrong. You still have it. It's just on the other side of the partition now. Those responsibilities have to be relayed to the other team. And that's a very simple example. That's almost obvious. And the other team now implementing something in software that used to be done in hardware, they should know they're going to have to test it. But taking all of the requirements in the test sets around the original one and translating it onto the other side of the partition, simply because of the partition move. If you make things like that systematic in your process, then they won't fall through the gaps. Right?
Gotcha.
Hopefully.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Let's go with the next question, and it'll be interesting. It's about AI. How are you using AI, if using it at all in your work today?
So, good question. I've used it a little bit with firmware, like writing like some code that runs on something, with amazing success, like especially like kind of on the a smaller embedded system or what have you. There are tools out there that you can go into a coded assistant and tell it, I'm using this microcontroller, this framework, and I want to get information out of a low raw controller and then have it verify it against this sensor and then respond, and it's just like, and it impressively is effective for relatively basic but still impressive firmware. I played around with that it's amazing. And like I said, I think you want to keep eyeballs on things, especially if they're mission critical, but it works pretty well, and that's nice. It's in the end, it's not doing anything that the human wouldn't have done. It's just where it might take someone a few weeks to bumble around that, or an expert a day.
Yep.
It can do it in 20 minutes and,
right.
or 10 minutes. And, but you still kind of need the expert to tell it what you want.
Exactly.
So I've done that. I have not done the hardware design. Like I said, there are some companies out there that are developing hardware design tools, and I just haven't given that a shot yet, but it's kind of on my to-do list, to be honest. It has been for quite a while now, because I just think it's really, it's really interesting. And I have some suspicions, like if I had to do that it does work really well, but that I bet a lot of the energy and effort, as I was saying earlier, probably goes into verification.
I think it's going to be 95% awesome and fast, and then you're going to have to find the 5%
right
that's not right and tweak it.
Exactly right. Yeah. And then hopefully, they've developed their tool so that it tries to catch that 5%, and that, they're seeking the tail of it being, 99.999% good, and it just works most of the time. So, but let me be honest with you. And this is one of these things where, the low hanging fruit gets picked first. But because a lot of my work nowadays is kind of education oriented, I design a lot of hardware that is for teaching other people. AI has been fantastic for helping me with descriptions of things and illustrations of things. So kind of like the way that low hanging fruit, like, I have a lot of friends in the education industry, and they're using AI for like, give me the five most important things my students need to know about whatever. And then they turn it into like a lecture or a quiz or something. It's almost like I don't do that exactly. Although now that I'm saying it, I probably should, but I do things like making illustrations and making things that are really like, that really aid in my pursuit, my pedagogical pursuit to communicate information that's of a maybe a slightly confusing technical nature. I feel like the power of the AI tools to make quick, detailed, strong language, even if I have to then edit the crap out of it, or to make really nice illustrations, it's fantastic, like it a lot.
Very cool. And how do you see it changing cybersecurity, both on the offense and the defense side, and specifically for hardware would be interesting?
Well, we kind of touched on that a little bit before that. I think it really, one big concern that I sort of have, or not concern, just thing that I think, that we're going to be facing more and more is just that it can make things happen so quickly. Just like now, all by myself, without having to call up 3 different, graphic designers and explain something to them over and over and over again, I can make a really beautiful illustration of something. Someone who wants to be a bad actor and attack systems they are just so amplified, right? There's this great quote I like from a techno band that technology is the man amplifier. That really everything, like when you think of, a technology like a bicycle, it just amplifies my ability to walk, right? And any technology is a man amplifier. And you take a hacker and you amplify a black hat hacker and you amplify bad news. Unfortunately, it also amplifies the power of a white hat hacker. And I think, it's great that you're asking defensively and offensively, because I think those things go together. So now bringing it right down to hardware, I think just, extending that, now the exploiters can do so much more quickly. The fact that the hardware is often a weakness in a system, or can easily be a weakness in a system, because it's, the hardware engineers are often, and when I say hardware, I'm including like firmware engineers, they're often focused on just get it to work, and they're trying to wing every little thing, and they're worried about conserving every little resource. And luckily this has changed in the last 10 years, but it used to be, they weren't worried about security at all. I know when I was first doing hardware design, and I was doing some stuff for security devices, and it was always kind of like we'd have to be like at the end, be like, oh yeah, we need to make that more secure. And so I think that finding all, there's so much potential for different little errors and exploitable holes in a hardware system, that having AI software that can search those out very rapidly and attack them, that might be a problem. But, like I said, hopefully there's a flip side to that too.
Yep. Hopefully the bad guys has the better tools.
Yeah. It's a cat and mouse game, right?
It never changes. It just accelerates.
Right. Well, and in the context of things just being more and more, I actually think there can be good that comes of that too, simply from overexposure. So, for example, it used to be that once a month I'd get some spam or a phishing email about, text message saying, here's a good one, the text message of, I'm in your neighborhood giving free estimates on roof repairs. That's a big deal here in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it used to be I'd get one of those every month, and I'd slow down and think, oh, my roof, do I need it? And then I'd remember, oh no, I replaced my roof 2 years ago. No, of course, I don't need that. Delete. Now I get 746,321 of those an hour. So I just instantly delete all of them, and they're all garbage. I report them all as spam. I'm beginning to wonder, will there be any phone numbers left? Because they're all going to be tagged as spam numbers, right? Of course, all of that's happening because there's some AI script that someone wrote out there that's like, every homeowner in Florida, contact them every 7 nanoseconds to see if you can give them an estimate on their roof. And it's like, it's so frequent that it's just become an absurdity, and now everyone just ignores it. And so almost like a strengthening of the cyber.
We're training people to ignore.
Yeah. Like it's like getting a shot for like a virus. You dump so much virus, hopefully dead virus, on someone that their immune system just reacts to it. It's like now we're all getting these ridiculous attacks, these spamming and phishing techniques every nanosecond that we just don't even. It's like they become invisible. They're air because there's so many of them. And as these systems, of course, that sounds all well and good a system like this that's exploiting, credit card information or banking or something like that, or, attacking medical devices, that's going to be a lot more catastrophic than someone trying to sell me roofing services. But I think the analogy holds, I hope.
Yeah, it makes sense. Very cool. Yeah, one of the things I actually enjoy using AI for is just taking pictures of the hardware. We used to have to look with a microscope, or not a microscope, but a magnifier, and look at the FCC IDs and things like that, and then try to figure out what things are. And AI seems to be really good at, you just give it a picture and it'll tell you what you're looking at, and how kind of it works at a high level. Nice.
Yeah. So here's a funny thing related to that. I was teaching of all things. I'm a volunteer, adult volunteer leader with the Boy Scouts of America, and I was teaching the electronics merit badge. And one of the things that I always have them. There's a whole slew of activities, but in one of them, I dump a bunch of old axial lead resistors on the table, and I explain to them how the color codes work, and I make them go through and calculate the color codes. And part of it is to make them think about exponents and stuff. It's not so much about caring about these old style resistors. And then we get out a multimeter, so then they get to learn how to use a multimeter and measure it and verify their numbers. Well, sure enough, I think it was either the last time or the time before that I was teaching that badge class. Someone whips out their phone and is just taking pictures and asked, and of course they're like, I asked AI like that sentence actually technologically means anything, but they're like, what is this resistor? And it was able to be like, oh, it has this and this and this color code. That isn't anything because it's backwards. If you reverse it, then it's this. It was upside down. It's a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor. And I'm like, that's pretty impressive. Now do it the way I said to do. But yeah, I think it, like you're saying, being able to just take a picture of a board and being like, what is this? What's it doing? And pretty cool.
Actually, that is the dangerous thing, is over reliance on AI, right? Especially for new folks, they could just like always rely on it, not really learn. And we do need the expert that verifies the AI. So we do need people to know what they're doing, not rely on it solely like that.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
All right. Next one is, what's the biggest misconception people about security testing, or maybe hardware security testing here? Like when you talk to people and you explain what you do they have common misconception a lot of people have?
I'm having a hard time with that. I think so few people think about or care about cybersecurity, particularly with respect to hardware. I think not enough people think about it in general, but with respect to hardware, I don't think enough people think about it. So I don't think there's a common misconception. Maybe the misconception is making the error in judgment that it doesn't matter, or that.
Yeah, actually, that's it.
About that. Yeah, or we'll be on to the next version of the hardware before someone figures that out, or like those are the myths that we need to bust. That
actually, those are great answers. A lot of people don't think about hardware, and like 10 years ago, if you did a hardware test, it was no security at all whatsoever. It was like traveling back in time with Telnet is back, and all the old stuff is back. And what I've seen in the more recent hardware tests I've looked at, people are a lot more careful nowadays, and they think through things, and they try not to put sensitive information on their firmware that can be later extracted and things like that. That's what you've also observed over the last 10 years or so. It's starting to get a little bit better. I'm not saying that it's doing great, but
I would say absolutely. It's getting better and better all the time. And now there are standards for, secure design approaches and things like that. I think more and more enterprise development operations are trying to hold their engineers to a higher standard, and giving them the resources, more importantly, so that it's not just like, oh, can you get this working tomorrow? It's like, can you get this working, and then spend 3 months hardening it and ensuring that it's safe and secure, and then it's done. Right. That it's not just done because it works. And I think traditionally hardware and we bridged that gap a long time ago with things like, let's say, for example, spurious emissions, EMI, like, the requirement to do FCC certification on, and other government certifications and other jurisdictions on radio hardware. We've had that for a while now. And now we're starting to think along those same kind of control and regulatory and protective mindsets around cybersecurity. And that's fantastic. We have to keep moving, right? Like we made that kind of cat and mouse analogy. We have to keep, those of us that are trying to make better systems, better, more secure, usable, commercially successful systems. We have to stay one step ahead of the people that are pursuing them and trying to break them down.
Yep. Cool. Very awesome. What's a vulnerability or attack vector you think is underestimated right now? Like if somebody is doing hardware tests, what is something that you don't see enough people, just one thing that you don't see enough people testing for, looking for, that you think would help them be more successful with their testing?
Well, I'm very happy to say that I see this happening more and more, but we need to be more aware of it as firmware update. That I think in a lot of systems, it's again one of these things where we don't put enough energy into it up front. And by energy, what I really mean is people are not given the resources, the time, and the money, and the manpower to make sure that their firmware update is secure enough on many levels. And that and I think I've seen a lot of correction in that area, but we still have a ways to go because if a system is important enough or widespread enough, and you can make a nefarious injectable firmware into it. In most cases, it's just not worth doing that usually, right? Which is why a lot of systems can get away with not being very secure. But you get something that's deployed enough, like a Nest thermostat or something, and you can use that to become a attack surface for the whole network.
Yeah.
Right? It's worth going through all the effort it might be worth it to a bad actor to exploit figure out, learn everything about, find the weaknesses, and then exploit the firmware update capability of the processor or the control system in a device like that. Right.
Yeah, and if you update the firmware, I guess it doesn't really matter anything else after is secure if you're able to override everything. And
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to kind of make this example, I don't know that it was a very good one. I think, but hopefully I got through some people. And I remember having conversations about this way back in the 90s, like mid 90s, that with digital security, you can have your security system can be, and I was thinking about making an analogy of like those old U-bolt locks that we would put on a bicycle. You can have something that's like a thick steel bolt. And if it just has like a one atom crack through it, you can pump bits through that. And now that entire steel bolt and that one place where it opens up, it is now an insecure system. Like the whole thing has to interlock and maybe have layers of interlocking security, which is more along the lines of what we do now. But I think you just need to be really careful. You do get one tiny little hole in a system and all of your security just goes to crap. If you can, you made that analogy, which is very important, that if you can just replace the firmware, all of the security you had to, encrypt connections and have logins on the shell and all these types of things, that's now nonsense. If you can just replace the firmware, who cares about all that other stuff?
Yep. Very cool. What is a piece of advice you could give to somebody wanting to break into cybersecurity today, or more specifically hardware testing, perhaps?
So a thing that I'm real big on, and I would actually say this applies to almost anything, but with technological stuff, I really love it, is if you're trying to break into something, and hold on, no pun intended here. I don't mean exploit security. I mean, get into a new field. Document your progress in developing your expertise in that field. And I would say one of the best ways of doing that is make a portfolio, which is just a fancy marketing way of saying, make a GitHub account. And whenever you do anything, just share it on there, and then share it with other people who might be doing work in that area. And they might say, oh, that's really cool. That reminds me of this project I did 2 years ago that did this. And then you look at that, you can see what they did differently, what might be better about yours, or what, let's say they did it, but they did pathological situation. You're trying to learn about making something with some microcontroller and you make it and someone's like, oh, good work. I did something like that 2 years ago. And you look at theirs and it's way more advanced. Well, you can see what's more advanced about it and then think, what would be the next step from what they did? And then that's your next project, right? And I think just documenting all of your progress and putting it into a portfolio that's just very transparent of this is what I'm working on. I mean, I think that's really powerful because when someone can see what you've done, that is way more meaningful than not that you shouldn't also have a CV and a resume and a LinkedIn, but if you have a collection of completed work that demonstrates, use of various tools, use of various technologies, maybe even document some of I tried this and it didn't work, so I changed it to this. That's what employees want to see, right? That's what employers want to see. And I think doing that and then maybe even throwing in there where you expanded your education in some abstract traditional sense, like I took this course or whatever on Coursera from Stanford about digital signal processing, and then I was working on this thing that was like a voice processor, and I realized it was probably muddling this frequency band because of aliasing, which was something we covered in this course, and tying it together. And they're like, I think anyone would look at that and you might think, oh, they're going to look at that and think, well, this is just nonsense they teach in school. But if someone looks at that and they're like, wow, this person's able to learn something and then immediately apply it to a real system, that's powerful. And I think anyone doing that, and I unfortunately, I don't have like a link to it or even remember the fellow's name, but there was someone out there who was like, people that want to get into IT and maybe even some of it was security based, do this in this training program and then do this and build this in your home lab and then document it, like making notes about everything you did. And then, even if it's not super polished, just make it so that someone can see the process you've gone through, the speed at which you went through it. And also maybe be able to get some sense out of your passion, your communication skills, your grit, right? Because a lot of times an engineering problem, a technological problem requires that you run into a wall and there's a failure, and then you stand up and you do it again and again and again and again. And then finally you break the wall, you don't break, the wall breaks. And I think seeing a technological person who has that grit, that's a really big deal. I mean, I worked for a tech company for a while, an organization that I was one of the only people in there who was not military or veteran. And I kind of got it. And that all of those people were just like, I did find out also that like they made an exception for me because I had this really great technical background, but also I played college football. So I fell in this guy follows directions. He knows how to be part of a team, and he is going to hit the wall and hit the wall and hit the wall and hit the wall until the wall breaks. And I realized of everyone in that organization, I'd be in a room full of, technology experts, even a good number of them were even women. And, in the 500,000 push-ups I'd done in my life was nothing compared to everyone else in the room. And these are people that just do it. They nail it until they break through and grit. Enormous, I think, in finding success and proving your value to an organization is demonstrate a lot of grit.
Yeah, I think try harder ethos from OffSec rings true here. You just got to keep going and keep trying. And it's been the story of my life too. Like I was mentioning earlier, learning C++. I became a senior C++ engineer in one part of my career, but it was not easy. It was hitting a lot of walls and whatnot. And just never gave up. I like the idea for the GitHub. There's a lot of different ways, that'll help people also to get discovered, right? Is another way to get discovered, get some feedback from other people, remember what you've built, go back to it, revise it, and continue learning.
Yeah, and just always seek to be helpful, be useful. And, when you're useful to other people, they'll seek you out for more solutions.
Yeah, they do say the best way to learn is to teach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, learn it, do it, teach it. I am a big fan of that. I try to do a lot of teaching. It's one of my passions. Like I've said, HackerBoxes is basically an educational company, and I do a lot of other. I do trainings and a lot of other educational oriented things. I think it's funny. I love to tell people this parallel, and I think you would find this interesting given some other things you and I have talked about. But in the world of patent law, we actually refer the development of a patent application as teaching the invention. That's actually how we say it. We're like, it's the attorney's job or the drafter's job, who's usually the patent attorney, to take the inventor's invention, teach it. And initially they're teaching it to the patent examiner. And then, hopefully somewhere there, they're teaching it to maybe investors or other people that might be looking at the patent as an asset. And then, in unfortunate situations, they might be teaching it to finder of fact in an adversarial context of a judge or a jury that needs to learn about why this invention is different than this product or this practice, or why they might be the same.
I see. Okay.
And it's very much teaching, and it just comes down to being a super clear communicator, and in a way, managing people is teaching. You're constantly teaching your people, even if, ideally you're managing people that are smarter than you in the context of exactly what they're doing, but you still have to communicate with them what the requirements are, what has to get done. And I think I kind of view the world and interacting with other people and communications and everything I'm trying to do, everything that I do as a human, I see a huge teaching component to that. And that might be my personal bias, or maybe there's something fundamental about that. But
no, that makes sense. I mean, even children, right? You teach them and you guide them. So it's I guess life, there's a whole lot of teaching going on when you start thinking about it.
Yeah. And, like I was saying earlier, I don't love that everyone's all AI crazy right now. But when you think about it, the thing that is interesting about an AI system is it's just a hollow network of interconnected, statistical points. And then it is trained with everything that humans have created. It's taught, teach something and then let it go. It's a fascinating approach.
It does give the illusion of creativity, but it doesn't really, right? It just...
Well, this is what I think. I was about to say I don't want to get philosophical, but actually I do, because I think, much like teaching, philosophy is at the core of a lot of things. But I actually think some people say, you look at like an AI algorithm, a network that's been trained, and it's just trained on all the data, and it's just going to give you, like, for example, with language, it just kind of tries to predict what the next word would be, and given all the language it's looked at. Well, here's the thing though, is and maybe this at some subconscious level underlies why humans are so irritated by this. Is that what I'm doing? You know, like when you say you give me the prompt of what was your first experience with computers, and I'm thinking first, early, young, kid, playing with things, computers, computerized. Oh yeah, Frogger. It was Frogger. Like, that's exactly what it's doing, right? It's exactly, and you know, and my brain is just a bunch of neurons and neural network connected together and relating concepts in a way that are not obvious from the outside, right? It's just, you know, so it sort of begs that question to the extent that, you know, instead of asking the question, is the AI actually intelligent? I mean, maybe the converse question is, well, what really is intelligence? Am I intelligent, or am I just trained on a bunch of data that my parents gave me, that TV gave me, that John Hughes films gave me, and then I spit out what I think is the next most relevant, interesting phrase that goes with whatever you said.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we're not just machine, that like totally predictable machine, that there's some other factors that makes us different, and
God willing, right?
Yeah, I think we are different, and we have. That's why you know, AI is super helpful. It's a great accelerator, but it's not by itself yet at the point where it can do everything, and there's still ways to go. I think we will keep providing value for a long time.
I totally agree with that. I think it's a fun time, and we do have to be careful with things, but we don't have to live in fear. So
that's right, exactly. Yeah, we have to embrace what it is and do the best we can with it, and be positive about the future. Last question. Where can people find you and follow your work?
Well, probably the easiest answer to that would be HackerBoxes.com. That's one of the things I spend most of my time on these days, especially if you're hearing some of the things we're talking about and you're like, oh, I would like to learn about some hardware. You know, check out some of the stuff we sell at HackerBoxes.com. That company, which I started 11 years ago now, it exists to expose people to kind of a little smattering of things that are related to electronics, hardware design, computer security, and even a little bit of like cyber culture, hacker culture stuff, and to kind of weave all that together and make it kind of fun. And our primary offering is every month we make a subscription box, and we send it out every month, and it's a surprise. You know, our subscribers get it, and they, you know, and there's a lot of them. We have customers in every state, and we're currently at like 27 countries.
Nice.
And, you know, we ship out enough of these little boxes. They're only this big every month that they have to bring us a special truck to fit them all in from UPS, from the US mail every month. So, and, it's really great to have all these people that then work on these projects, and, you know, and to watch their progress every month of, you know, oh, this doesn't work. Mine is broken. Oh, hold on. I had this hooked up wrong. And to have this learning experience all together, and you know, and then I get to do it again next month. So it is a little bit of a treadmill, but it's a lot of fun. And so that's HackerBoxes.com. Definitely, you can look for me there. My name's Joseph Long. You know, Joseph Long, patent attorney. You can probably find me on LinkedIn if you look on there, or you actually could probably go on LinkedIn and look for Joseph Long HackerBoxes. That might be a more narrowly applicable search. But
nice.
And I'm usually, even the customers of our company, unfortunately, I'll get a few emails a day from different customers about various different things. And I often will read them. And if it's something simple, like, why isn't this shipped? I just have someone else answer it. But, if it's a technological thing or a question about something, I find myself being like, oh, I want to give you this whole like half-hour spiel about, look at this and follow this link and do this, and be like an educational resource. And sometimes I do try to do that, but I can't always. But despite that, I don't mind people just like reaching out, and, you know, and if I have something meaningful that I can share with you, I always try to do it. Like I said, I'm ultimately an educator. I love sharing information.
That's great. Thank you so much, Joe. What you're doing for the community is amazing. Sharing your knowledge and helping people grow and training the next generation of hardware hacker is extremely valuable. Like we said, AI is not going to do everything for us, so we need these people. So keep up the good work. And
I should probably throw in there into the hacking community at this summer at DEF CON 34. I'll be teaching a hardware hacking, particularly wireless systems, wireless communication systems, hardware hacking at DEF CON, a workshop. So
Nice. Do you know the day that's going to be in DEF
It'll
CON?
be it's Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
All right. So Friday afternoon, check out Joe at DEF CON. Going to be the best class they have, I think.
I don't know about that, but be the best class I'm teaching.
I think it'll be super interesting. Well, thank you so much again, Joe, for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
And we'll catch up again later. Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care.
See ya.